Welcome to another episode of Changing the Tide. Today, I've got Mike Peterson from Bitcoin Beach. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Stoked to be here.
Yeah, stoked to have you. This has been in the works for a little while. Our mutual friends over at InGiven, James and Matt, kind of set us up a couple months ago, but I know you've been busy, so I'm glad we could nail down time here.
Yeah, I just got back to El Salvador last week, and so it's had some stuff to catch up on, but I feel like things are pretty good now, so it's fun to be able to chat here today about all the exciting things that are happening here.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot. I mean, least of which is in just a couple weeks, probably less than that actually, the Bitcoin law goes into effect down there.
Yeah, and I think that that's a little bit of a misunderstanding of what's happened. The law is actually in place, is at least parts of it, as far as Bitcoin being legal tender. A lot of the provisions that are actually being implemented are just the requirements that people accepted and those sorts of things. And so, and even those, it's hard to say what things they'll pull back on. I think the timeline was pretty aggressive, and so I'm really assuming it's going to be a very slow rollout.
Okay, got it. Are you seeing that a little bit there in El Zante, El Salvador, or is that kind of nationwide?
I think that's nationwide. I mean, just the sense that I've been getting from people, and it was kind of what I expected from the get-go. Just, you don't just transform something like that in 90 days. And so I'm sure there'll be things released, that get the ball rolling by that date, and there'll be, some great things that we can point to. But I mean, I think we should have realistic expectations. This is going to be, probably a couple year process to really get everybody up and running using Bitcoin. And it'll be incremental. It's not going to be kind of all at once. And actually, I think that's the best way for it to happen.
Yeah, that incremental, step-by-step nature. Hard to introduce kind of a second currency alongside the actual legal tender. And 90 days seems a little bit short for that. But so,
and I think a slow rollout too, that gives people time to, to be able to understand the volatility, to be able to understand, the role Bitcoin's going to play in their life. And so, we hope they kind of take that slowly and don't, go all in day one and have Bitcoin have a big pullback and then they panic. And so, I think it'll actually be good for everybody if the rollout is kind of more slow and orderly.
That's great. Well, hey, I want to make sure people hear the story of Bitcoin Beach today on this episode, and just kind of how you got involved and where it's come. One of the things I love asking guests early on, though, is, was there anything in your early years growing up or early adulthood that really prepared you to understand Bitcoin? And then what was your Bitcoin aha moment?
I mean, I think my whole life was basically leading up to understanding Bitcoin. I've always been fascinated by economics. I was an economics major. I've traveled quite extensively, kind of from 18 on. And so I think I've been to like 45 countries now. And so just seeing the challenges of, working in different currencies, of trying to move money from one country to another. I've had 25 years of just experiencing the headaches of that. I've run a concessions business in the U.S. for the last 25 years, and so we deal with payment processors, and I feel the pain of seeing 4 or 5% of our net sales go to the credit card processors, which sometimes can be 25-30% of the profits. And so I feel like in all these different things I've kind of seen that. And then what really was that aha moment for me was a few years ago in El Salvador. We were trying to buy a property, and just the process of trying to bring the money down here, it was a huge headache. The banks don't want to deal with you. And so it's like, okay, I have the money, we have a deal, but how do I actually physically get it here? And I remember thinking, man, if they just took Bitcoin, we could be done in this moment. And instead, we had to wire it to them. I had to trust that they would actually sign the documents once it hit in their account, rather than us being able to do it at the same time. And it was this stressful 3 weeks of my life. It was, the deal almost fell through. And so all these things, I just realized, man, Bitcoin solves all these issues. And we're using the banking system, like the technology they're using is the same as they used 30 years ago. It's literally crazy. Like, you send a wire, and they don't even give you like a confirmation number. You don't even know if it went through. You can't check up on it. You don't know where it like goes for days, and then finally, hopefully it arrives. But sometimes it takes 2 or 3 calls to follow up, and they'll say, "Oh no, it's held up because we need this information, or we want your last 2 years of tax returns," or yeah. So that was the moment I'm like, okay, if El Salvador just adopts Bitcoin, it'll make it so much easier for investors. It'll make it so much easier for businesses. I mean, I knew people that walked away from properties just because they're like, nah, it's just too crazy to do it. I don't trust that I'm actually going to get the property once it hits their bank account. And so, yeah, Bitcoin fixes those things.
Wow. Wow. So I had heard that maybe there was some prior relationship with El Salvador before. I didn't know that you ran a concessions business in the United States. Is that like at a stadium or at stadiums, I should say, or is that like vending machines or?
No, we go to large fairs in California, so we have a bunch of different food trailers that we take to a number of different events, and so that was kind of what allowed us to come to El Salvador in the first place. We kind of work crazy hours for 3 months a year, and then we'd have the rest of the year off, and we went on vacation in El Salvador on a surf trip and just kind of fell in love with the country and started spending more and more time, and then just found opportunities to start volunteering and implementing economic development programs here. And so we kind of started splitting our time between El Salvador and the U.S.
Incredible. Yeah, well, that surfing bit is very, very apropos for a podcast called Changing the Tide. So
Exactly.
So about Bitcoin Beach, let's talk a little bit there on how did that all come about? Was that part of the economic development work you were doing?
Yeah, we were running a number of different programs, and then we were also working kind of in a support role with a number of different NGOs and churches that were doing work down here. And so we were introduced by one of those organizations. They had a donation of Bitcoin, and they knew I was in the Bitcoin space, and so they said, hey, what can we do with this Bitcoin? And so I kind of went through, gave them a brief history of Bitcoin, and told them a few different ways that they could probably use it advantageously, and didn't think anything else of it. And a few months later, they called and said, hey, do you want to meet this person that donated this Bitcoin to us and see if they want to help with the work you're doing in El Salvador? And of course I thought, I doubted that they were going to be interested. It was totally different than what they were doing in the U.S., but I was fascinated, why this person was donating Bitcoin. And so I was like, yeah, for sure, I want to meet them. And one thing led to another, and basically the donor and his advisor came back to me and said, hey, well, give us a proposal for how you would use it and kind of make sure that it's not just being converted to dollars. We want to see it being used in real ways, like in ways where the Bitcoin is actually part of the program and an asset and a advantageous part of the program, not just an extra step for you to have to change it to fiat. And so I came back with this ludicrous idea that we were gonna, start a Bitcoin circular economy on the coast in El Salvador, and that we were going to start injecting it in the community in different ways through our programs, and we'd bring all these businesses on board, and we would, kind of demonstrate how it could impact the lives of people that have been locked out of the banking system, and just functionally why it would be easier for them. And the thing we hadn't anticipated at that time, to be honest, was how much it would actually change their mindset when it comes to savings and looking towards the future. We realized a few months in that these people that, traditionally hadn't been big savers, all of a sudden wanted to save because they felt like, hey, if I spend this today, it might be worth, twice as much down the road. And so if I don't really need it, I'd rather save until I really need to spend it. And so we saw Bitcoin kind of pushing these good spending and just economic savings habits on people. And that wasn't even really something we had planned on.
Wow. So when did this all start, the Bitcoin Beach? When did you have the meeting with the donor, for instance?
So it happened a little over 2 years ago was the first meeting, and it was, right around this time 2 years ago that we started kind of laying the groundwork. We hadn't even done anything with anybody yet, but we were just starting to lay the groundwork to roll this out in the community. I was talking to my team here about it, the people that had helped us with these other programs, and they're looking at me like, wait, what? There's this magical internet money that people use on their phones, and somehow it's worth something, but there's no country behind it, and you think people are going to accept this? And so it was, they were like all of us when we first hear about Bitcoin. They were skeptical. They thought it sounded like some type of Ponzi scheme, some type of scam. But I took a couple of the guys who were working with me down to the Latin American Bitcoin conference in Uruguay. And, after that weekend, we had them fully indoctrinated. They were totally on board, gone down the rabbit hole, and, understood why Bitcoin is money and why it is the world's best money, and how advantageous it would be for the people here to start using it, especially here where these people are locked out of the more traditional banking services. And so, that was kind of how it started.
And were these people that you took down to Uruguay, they were native Salvadorans?
Yeah, they were people. It was two guys that were kind of like my right-hand guys in the two communities that we work in. And so, both in their late 20s, I think at that time, early 30s, right around there, and kind of community leaders, but had never been out of sight of El Salvador before.
Oh wow!
And so this was a crazy thing to take them to this Bitcoin conference, and I think Max Kaiser was like the first speaker. He came up and he's screaming and throwing stuff, and they're looking at me like, "What in the world?" But by the end of the weekend, they were they had definitely gone down the rabbit hole.
And maybe for people who are listening who don't quite understand what it means to be locked out of the traditional banking system, El Salvador has had an interesting relationship with the US dollar. Could you maybe explain that for people who are unaware of just money in El Salvador?
Yeah, so I think it was back around 2000, El Salvador decided to basically dollarize their economy. So they officially got rid of their currency, which was the colon at that time. I think technically it was still in existence, but they basically phased it out when it pegged at a pegged exchange rate, and then it basically just went out of circulation. So it was all you could use was dollars anywhere. And I think that was just based on a history of there being times of inflation when government rulers would come in and just want to fire up the printing presses. I don't think they realized who we had coming to run our printing presses in the U.S. at the time, or they probably would have chosen something else. Although all the currencies are like that, so right. I don't know what they would have done. But they thought it was better to put their monetary policy in the hands of the U.S. and move everything over to the dollar. And so, when you come down here, that's what you spend. You get quarters back in change. Everything's priced in dollars. That's how people think here.
But at the same time, we're not talking about U.S. banks, with some of the trappings that come along with being able to have a U.S. passport and be able to use the U.S. banking system, right? It's more the dollars are down there, but there's no real way to, how do I put this? It's printed and sent down there, but they don't have all the other advantages that might come with that. Is that correct?
Not exactly.
Okay.
I mean, there's definitely a pretty robust functioning banking system here. It's definitely much more cumbersome to use than in the U.S., and the fees are a lot higher, but there is a functioning system. But for most of the people here, they don't really earn enough for the banks to be interested in opening an account for them.
Got it.
So, a lot of them are only earning $300 a month, and so for the banks to make any money off of them is very unlikely. So a lot of times they'll exclude them if they don't have formal employment that they can kind of prove where they're getting their salary from. And the majority of the people here work in the informal sector. When they can open a bank account, the service is usually pretty poor. I mean, you might go and stand in line for hours. The fees are high, and so for the vast majority of the people, they've just kind of either officially or just by not being worth their time, they're kind of locked out of the system.
Got it. Yeah, one of the tweets I was reading was actually I was watching it. It was a video produced by someone in the Bitcoin community about a gentleman who, when he owned, I think he owned some sort of food cart or something like that, and he had to go 2 hours to deposit that money, and he's like, I like 2 hours to get to the bank is insane, and now that money is just sitting on his smartphone.
Yeah, I mean, and I think a lot of times we take for granted things like having our own vehicles and showing up to the bank and being able to get in within a few minutes. And so for the people here, the vast majority of them don't have cars, so they're riding the bus. And so what might be a 20-minute drive for us is an over an hour bus ride for them. And then once they get there, they got to stand in line, and that might take another hour and then another hour back. And, you've lost half your day just to go make a trip to the bank. And so for most of the people here, the banks just don't work. Like, it's not something that's even worthwhile for them to even try to force their way into, even if they will accept them as a customer.
Wow, yeah. So many things we might take for granted in the West, United States specifically, but yeah. So, read a tweet from you a couple months ago that was just made it very clear on the @BitcoinBeach Twitter handle, made it very clear this is Bitcoin only, like Bitcoin Beach. So the question is, why Bitcoin only? Why Lightning? Take us into that.
Sure. I mean, I personally believe, and we've always come to the project with this belief, that Bitcoin is going to be the money of the internet. I'm only slightly toxic. I'm less toxic than some. I mean, I do think there'll be roles for other cryptocurrencies. I'm not that they're all scams, and there are a lot of scams for sure. But I think that there'll be some cool things that come out of that space. And so, but I think for what we're trying to do, I think Bitcoin just needs to be the focus. And I've seen too many people get sidetracked into these other things, and before they know it, they've lost all their funds. Where people who just kind of dollar cost average into Bitcoin over time, they always come up out on top. And so the other thing is, everybody in the world knows what Bitcoin is. Like, it is the one currency, I don't care where you go, you will find a market for it. Much more than anything else. Even the other cryptos that have a decent following, you go somewhere out in the middle of nowhere and you want to exchange it for whatever the local currency is, you're going to be much better off if you had Bitcoin. And I think people underestimate how important that network effect is when you're trying to introduce a new currency, when you're trying to introduce a crypto as the currency of the area. You need that liquidity and you need that network effect. And so there's no reason to go beyond Bitcoin.
Hey, you heard it here from a guy who's got an economics degree. As far as Lightning, then, what benefits has that brought? Because really, changing the tide sees Bitcoin on the Lightning network as this just gravitational force that is continuing to grow in strength, and pretty soon everyone's going to feel those effects. But from your perspective, what would have been the benefits of Lightning?
I mean, Lightning is the game changer. It is, without Lightning, Bitcoin is only a store of value. It's not a transactional currency in the long run, at least for smaller transactions. And so Lightning really takes all the not negative, but all of the challenges that come with Bitcoin and all the reasons people argue for all these other coins that are out there. And it basically wipes out that argument because it provides that instant transaction. It provides the low cost fees, all those things that people are saying these other coins are going to be the better Bitcoin, like Lightning takes care of. And so you still have the network effect. You still have the sound money principles of Bitcoin. You still have knowing that anywhere in the world you'll be able to transfer into the local currency or use it for whatever you want. But also you have all the usability aspects that have been people's complaints and criticisms of Bitcoin. And Lightning pretty much fixes that. And so, yeah, we're still early in the times, and there's going to be some bugs and there's going to be some challenges. But longer term, it pretty much is going to make all the other coins that are trying to be money just go away. I mean, I just don't even see the point.
Yeah, it really is the game changer with that near instant. I think Jack Mahler says near instant, near free settlement or something like that. So
No, and it's for people to use Bitcoin for the first time. If they're doing an on-chain transaction, they're like, okay, well, I sent it. How come they don't have it? And well, what do you mean? It could be 10 minutes. It could be 10 hours. How do I know when they're going to get it? Why was the fee this much? So it's, for smaller transactions, it just doesn't make sense. But with Lightning, they send it. The store that they're sending it to, it like pings on their phone right away. They have it. It's all done deal. And so it's very easy for them to understand, why this is an upgrade from using dollars.
That portability through time and space instantly without having to hold something is pretty incredible. So I've also seen I've seen you in a couple talks. I've listened to a couple podcasts. I've read some of the tweets. It's been very important for you from the beginning, seemingly, that this is an El Zante community thing, not a Mike Peterson thing. Can you maybe talk a little bit about the importance of that to you and why that's been such a focus?
Yeah, I mean, that's the community, what it's all about. I'm just a middle-aged white guy here that's enjoying the surf and the beautiful life that's here, and I feel very indebted to the community for kind of adopting our family and letting us in. And so we've kind of pushed some of these things, but the people on the ground that have actually been onboarding the individuals, getting the stores to start accepting Bitcoin, walking with them when Bitcoin is crashing and trying to keep them from just wanting to sell everything, explaining the details of how it works and trying to figure out when to give them more information so we don't overload them at first, but we kind of allow them to grow into it. That's been all the stuff that the local team has done. And so, I can tweet pictures out on Twitter, and I can make some connections to try to channel them into the community and do those things. But most of what I'm doing is behind the scene, and so it's the locals that are really driving this forward. And so I think that's crucial, one, just because it's the truth, like that's how it's happening. But I also think it's crucial for people to know that this is a Central American initiative. Like, this is not white Americans coming in and trying to push their ideas on. This is Central American young people seeing a opportunity and seeing a chance for them to be included in the world's financial system that they've been excluded from in the past, and them embracing it and running with it and kind of showing the rest of the world how this can work. And so instead of them following the U.S.'s example, they're the ones leading the charge, and the U.S., when they ever get their act together, will be following their example. And so I think it's important people know the reality of how this has transpired and who's doing the work here.
You're really providing a blueprint. And I think that was really fascinating at the beginning of this conversation when you mentioned one thing that we didn't expect is that it pushed people into a savings mentality. And so obviously hard money is going to help you do that because you don't have to spend it right out of the gate. There's this, like you said, this idea, hey, if I spend this now and tomorrow it's here, like, was the good that I just paid for or whatever service, was that really worth it? Has there been anything else that's really surprised you about the community adoption, the growth, anything along those lines?
One thing just to kind of follow up on that, I think something we don't realize in the U.S. is how big of an opportunity it is for people to finally have there be an asset that they can put their wealth into. Or when I say wealth, that could be, $10 or $1 million, but they can put their savings into and know that it's most likely going to go up in time versus their local currency, versus having to be in their local currency and continuing to depreciate. In the U.S., we have Robinhood, we have all these apps that we can invest in equities, we can do all these things. 80% of the world doesn't have that. They don't have any other opportunity. They don't have anything they can store their wealth in. If they have quite a bit of money, maybe they can buy some land. But for most of them, even acquiring that much and being able to save enough to buy land and not have the value of the land grow faster than their savings is, they're kind of locked out. And so you'll see people here, they'll buy cement blocks instead of, they'll, in their mind, they're thinking, well, we know these are probably going to keep going up. And so I can't do anything else with my money right now. And I know I want to add a room down the road. So I'm just going to buy cement blocks now to kind of lock in that price. And, if blocks are 80 cents now and when they're 90 cents when I build, like I'll have saved that much money by buying them now. But that's not a way to build wealth. That's a way to slow down the losing of your wealth. And so for the first time, they have the ability to put in something that's historically has been going up. I mean, obviously there's no guarantees and this is a new asset class and, all those kind of disclaimers that we always put out there. But we believe that it's going to continue to go up in value versus the dollar. And so for them to have that chance to actually put that in something, that's huge. And so I think we can't underestimate that.
Some are. I saw a tweet the other day from the head of the Minneapolis Fed that was basically saying, show me communities where, and he used the words crypto, but where crypto is actually helping people build wealth other than scammers who are pumping and dumping. So perhaps this particular individual should listen to this podcast.
You should come down and talk to these people that have been, slowly putting some of their savings in Bitcoin. And then, when it was 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, and when they have an opportunity to do something with that, put a new roof on their home. One of the guys that we know, he got his teeth fixed. I think he was in his 40s, and he had these teeth issues he never had the money to, and he had saved enough in Bitcoin that he was able to go and get his teeth fixed. Another lady whose son was really sick, and the medication she needed was a couple $1,000s, and she never had that kind of money before, but she'd been setting some aside in Bitcoin, and she had those funds, and she was able to buy that medicine. And so we see all kinds of examples like that. People buying cows with Bitcoin, people buying properties with Bitcoin. And so it's kind of a double value. One, it just encourages savings in general, where before they just felt like, well, I might as well spend it now because it's going to go down in value over time, so I'll just spend it. So it encourages that saving mindset. But two, it does grow in value over time also. And so you put those two together, and a lot of these people have 10 times as much wealth as they would have had without Bitcoin.
That's incredible. And yeah, I think the more people can go and have these on the ground examples and see them and actually talk to individuals where policy for years has affected their lives to the negative, and then they find this new network and asset that is unencumbered by people trying to manipulate the game, and it changes their lives. So that's a good point to double down on.
Yeah, it's fun watching them go through that process because I think around the world we're all kind of the same. We have to go through those stages of when we're introduced to Bitcoin and going from that, this is a scam, this is crazy, to, wow, okay, I think I should put more of my wealth in this because I trust it more than anywhere else I could place, my wealth in right now.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Well, there it is, the growing gravitational force. As far as just the building of the Bitcoin Beach wallet, I know that's been a huge part of the work down there, and I believe is it Nicholas Birdie? Is that how I would say?
Yeah, Birdie or Bertie, or I don't know. I'm sure I pronounce it wrong every time, but he always tells me it's fine. So it's
what a kind.
He's French, so I'm sure no matter how I try to say it, it'll be wrong. So he just humors me.
But as far as that, how have you seen that grow, and have there been any unexpected surprises there for the good? I mean.
Yeah. So that was the wallet's been kind of a joint venture between us and Galoy Money. They're the creators behind the wallet, and they approached us and said, hey, we really want to learn more how people are actually using Lightning for transactional purposes, and we love your project and what you're doing. what if we build a wallet for you guys and we put in all the features that you want and we provide the support and we do all these things and there's no charge. We handle the developers and all of that side, and on their end the benefit was that they got that real world feedback and experience. They saw the issues. That it's one thing for a developer to make a wallet how they think people will use it. It's another thing for somebody that's living in a shack with dirt floors and tin walls that has intermittent internet service that wants to use it for small purchases. And so they were smart enough to realize that there was a lot of things they didn't know that they didn't know, and so the best way was to just kind of see how people use it. And so, and of course, also they wanted to be part of this, exciting project that was going on down here. So we just formed this agreement that they would kind of help us with those things, and we've given them the feedback, and it's been kind of a win-win. I think are further along, I think, than anybody else in the space because they just understand how people actually use Bitcoin when they're not wealthy people, but they're people that are making a few $100s a month that are using it for transactional purposes. And for us, we've been able to include all kinds of cool features that hopefully will make it overall into the Lightning protocol. But for now, within the wallet we're using, just the ability for them to go back and forth between usernames and for us to put map locations of all the businesses using Bitcoin in El Salvador and people to be able to pay directly by just tapping on the map and auto-generating a Lightning invoice and all those different things. Because what we found, in order to get people on board, it doesn't just have to be a little bit better than dollars. It has to be a lot better because we're all creatures of habit.
Yep.
And so we want to do what we've always done because that's the easiest thing to do. We don't have to learn anything new. And so when we initially launched it, it all worked, but even the people at the stores, you'd say like, yeah, can I pay in Bitcoin? And they'd kind of give you this look like, all right, so they got to put down, they're making tortillas, they got to put that down, wash their hands off, go find their phone, create the Lightning invoice, do it, have you scan it, and, they would say, this takes way longer than just using money. And so with the features that Galoy built in and that people just being able to pay from the map or people being able to pay by the username at the thing, it actually made it faster than money. The store owner didn't have to do anything. They could just look over at their phone, hear it ping, and see that that's landed in their account. And so it really increased the uptake of people using Lightning because people are going to do what's easiest.
That's, wow, yeah, something that just came out yesterday that's really related to this is Square Crypto. They gave a grant to a UX designer named, I think it's Patricia Estevao. I think she's Portuguese. But the whole thing was open sourcing her work on the user experience of Bitcoin and Lightning, specifically with people who needed it. And a lot of what you're talking about, that is it Galoy? Galoy,
I don't know.
Okay,
Same thing, French name, so I'm sure I always pronounce it wrong.
Galoy. But kind of finding that same thing. And so it really sounds like the makers of the Bitcoin Beach wallet are, like you said, they are miles ahead, it seems like.
Yeah, no, they've been a great team to work with. They've been just super supportive and all along. And so, no, I think they're going to knock it out of the park longer term. And I think they have some exciting things going way beyond El Salvador kind of in the works. And so I'm excited to see what that company does.
Yeah, hopefully part of just playbooks for other countries too.
Yeah, no, and they've open sourced everything, and they want that. They want this to expand in an organic way, and they're open about everything that they're doing. And so we're actually in the process right now. They're going to spin the Bitcoin Beach wallet off as a separate entity from Galoy because they want, they feel like there needs to be a team here on the ground that's just focused on expanding that. They want to include the team here that's been part of getting that up and running. And so they've just been super generous with all of that, and everything's been done in good faith. And so I'm excited.
And it looks like they have some interesting roles opening up, including, I think it's the CEO of Bitcoin Beach Wallet.
Yeah, the CEO. We're searching right now for a CEO, and I think just half jokingly, half just to not hurt my feelings, they asked if I would take that role, and I was like, no, that's not. I'm not the right fit. I don't have the background and experience, and honestly, I think it should be a Salvadoran. I'm hoping we're able to find somebody who has a kind of banking background and enough of a understanding of the tech and Bitcoin, and can kind of combine those and lead this thing forward. But there's all kinds of exciting opportunities to integrate payments for all these different things. Just to give you one example, we're working on a program to bring internet to kind of some of the poorer areas that are really underserved when it comes to high-speed internet right now. And talking to some of these small providers, they said one of the biggest issues is it's just so expensive to collect the payments, because these are people who don't have bank accounts, and they usually want to pay by the week because that's how they're used to paying for things. And so sometimes the overhead of collecting the payments and sending somebody out into these rural villages to collect from all these people, it can eat up 20, 30, 40, 50% of the revenue just in that. And so we're working right now to be able to integrate that where they'll be able to pay directly from their app in Lightning. And basically all that overhead and expense goes away, which makes it economical to start operations in villages that before you just never could have justified opening in. Before, with the overhead and the systems they had before, they would always be money losers. Now they can be significantly less profitable and still worthwhile because you've gotten rid of all that overhead. And it's easier for the people. They don't have to go anywhere. They don't have to wait for the bill collector. They can just do it on their own time. So I think people underestimate how transformative this is going to be, specifically in the developing world where a lot of people don't have bank accounts, and all the things we take for granted with electronic payments just haven't impacted their lives at all.
That's really incredible. And so even in these remote villages, will they be paying on their smartphones, or would it be more from like a laptop desktop interface? All of the above?
Much more likely to be on the smartphone. I mean, the smartphone penetration is much higher than computer penetration, and so I think a lot of Americans underestimate the smartphone penetration throughout the world. I think in our minds, especially people in my age, category in their 40s or 50s, they think like, oh, smartphones are expensive, and it's because we kind of grew up during that time when they were,
Yep.
only the very wealthy had them. Now it's to the point you go to a poor village anywhere in the world, and more than likely the people you run into will have a smartphone, or somebody in their family will have a smartphone. They might not even have electricity at their house, but they have a solar panel or some other way that they are able to charge their smartphone. And so it's been interesting because people keeps using that as one of the criticisms of this. Well, internet penetration is only 35% in El Salvador, so you're going to lock all these people out of using Bitcoin. And what people don't realize is those statistics are usually referring to kind of broadband access. Almost 100% of the country in El Salvador has access to internet over over cell phones. Maybe if it's not service at their house, they have a hill they can walk up to use it. The vast majority of the stores and businesses are in locations that have some cell service. And part of the government's plan is people will not actually have to have internet service on their phone. They won't have to pay for it. The government is going to whitelist the wallets, and they haven't specified if that's just the Chivo wallet or if that's all wallets, but it'll basically allow anybody who has a smartphone anywhere where there's cellular service to use their wallet, whether they have internet service on their phone or not.
Wow, that's so it's not just the Lightning wallets aspect of it. They're really focusing on internet and specifically cellular service adoption.
Yeah, I mean, they're focused. They just realize the importance of both of those going hand in hand. They realize that, obviously people need to be able to use their wallets for it to really take off. And it's pretty easy for them. I'm not sure exactly if they're compensating the cellular companies or if that, there'll be some types of reductions in the fees and the taxes they pay for the licenses. but the internet, I mean, the Bitcoin wallets use very little bandwidth, and so it's not like it's going to be a drag on their capacity, but it's a real easy way to open this up for everyone.
And I imagine when it comes to smartphone penetration, it's more kind of the Android, cheaper Android devices typically, or is it kind of a variety?
It's a variety, but it's definitely primarily Android. I think we've seen it's probably about 90% Android, but even within that, you have the whole scale from the really cheap units to, most people have like a mid-level to, a lot of them even have the high-level Androids. And so we've had some challenges with the cameras not being high functioning enough to read the barcodes, but even a lot of that has kind of solved itself because just as technology progresses, the cameras just keep getting better. And so the $50 smartphone that couldn't read the code, last year now can, just because they're upgrading the camera, and keeping it at the same price. And so a lot of those issues are kind of working themselves out.
Yeah, it's amazing to think of the network effects of internet, mobile networks, and now Bitcoin all coming together, but specifically mobile networks and Bitcoin. That's a fascinating, another fascinating retort, I would say, to many of the criticisms of Bitcoin and Lightning, I'd say.
Yeah, it's funny. One interesting thing we saw when Strike was doing a big push here, and they were doing a lot of sign up incentives, and so there was a lot of Bitcoin floating around during that time. I heard from the guys at Bitrefill, and they asked me like, "Hey, what is Free Fire?" I'm like, "It's a mobile game that the kids here all play on their phones." He's like, "We're getting like a crazy number of payments through Bitrefill buying credits, in Free Fire, and we don't even know what it is. We thought we were getting hacked at first because they were just off the chart." And so it basically opens up for these kids that have never had the ability to participate in all those things. Now they have a currency. They can buy their cloak or their upgrade or their skin or whatever. And obviously that's not the best use of Bitcoin, and it's not the thing that excites me the most, but it just shows you the practical level that these are things that people want all over the world, and kids in the US are used to having access to this through their parents' credit cards. Now the youth here have access to this for Bitcoin that they're earning themselves. And so it's been quite fascinating to see how nobody told them how to do that. Like somebody figured that out and they told somebody else, and it just kind of grew naturally. And I was like, wow, I didn't even know that was something Bitrefill sold, but it became their most popular item.
What a story! That I had Jack Everett of Thunder Games, which is a mobile gaming company specifically.
I actually just spoke with him this morning. That's funny.
Oh, that is hilarious. The community is tight.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
what's so fascinating is to see mobile gaming too as this inroad, and amazing to hear that story of that being truly an inroad for Salvadorans, especially the young ones.
No, I mean, you think of all the things that are hard to do in the US without a credit card. Lightning takes care of all of those, and it actually does a lot better job. Like I've found if there's something I want to buy, it's much easier for me to even when I'm in the US, if they have the option between Lightning payment or a credit card payment, I always choose Lightning because then I just have to scan something, send, and I'm done. If it's a credit card, I have to get my credit card, type everything in. I usually make a typo along the way, and finally get it all in, and then I'm don't know what they're going to do with that info. If they're going to get hacked and it's going to leak out, and so there's lots of times where I don't mind paying the money for something, but it's the actual having to go get my credit card and doing all that. That's what keeps me from actually making that purchase. But Lightning just takes that friction away.
Yeah, the frictionlessness of it. It's probably been fun to watch Lightning grow as well. I mean, 2 years ago, it was a very hardcore bunch of people on Lightning, and it's just exploded. I'd say over, especially the last year. what have you seen in that way? How have you seen the growth, I should say?
It was interesting because when we switched over to Lightning, it was more of just a necessity. At that time, fees were spiking, and I was like, okay, well, this is our only choice. And it just happened to be the time that a lot of these wallets had significantly improved their user experience. And so we started using Wallet of Satoshi initially, and it was like, wow, this is great. It works. It's easy. And I didn't realize that, that was just very fortuitous that it was then, because if it would have been a few months before then, it would have been a very different experience. And so from the get-go, to me, it seemed like Lightning worked. And you talk to other people, they're like, oh, Lightning's going to be good in the future, but, it's not working now. And I'm like, well, yeah, it is. But, they had tried it a year before and were kind of had a bad taste in their mouth. And so they didn't realize how far along it's come. And so I think for us, it's been, there's been improvements with Lightning along the way, but a lot of it's just people realizing, oh, wow, it actually is usable, and coming and using it for the first time.
Yeah, it was this meme from outside the community that Lightning is always 18 months away, and that ain't the case anymore.
No, no. And of course, on the other side, there's going to be capacity issues. There's going to be growing pains. There's going to be, it's not going to go, overnight to handling all the world's payments. But the way it's built, it's scalable, and I believe it'll get there. And so I definitely wouldn't want to be in a business that was counting on Lightning failing.
Ooh, well, yeah, that's maybe that's some advice that people should be taking who are in payments businesses at the moment.
No, definitely. You see the credit card companies, obviously they want it to fail. Although even recently you see a lot of them are starting to get on board, or at least put their toes in, because they realize, okay, this is inevitable, so we need to figure out how we can ride this train. But the naysayers seem to be the biggest naysayers seem to be the different altcoins that have been built on the premise of doing everything basically that Lightning's doing, but without the benefit of having Bitcoin be the currency. And so for their project to actually work or even be viable, it has to fail. And so they're always coming out, and anytime there's one little thing, they focus on that. But I think it's pretty inevitable that Lightning's going to roll over all those things.
Yeah. Well, maybe changing tack a little bit. It was the evening of June 8th, and I hop onto Twitter and notice Nick Carter's space with, I believe it was the President Bukele's brother, who was, and then the president joined, and you actually even got to talk directly to him, and he even called you and the community out in El Zante for really showing that it worked. So was that a bit of a surreal experience for you and the community? Like, how did that all feel to you guys?
That was 100% surreal. I mean, that was funny thing. That was the first time I'd ever been on Twitter Spaces, so I didn't even really know what was going on. And Twitter Spaces has had its growing pains, just as people trying to get people up as speakers, and so Nick was dealing with all those issues. At one point, we lost the president, and he couldn't get him back up, and so it was definitely kind of surreal to be in there, and then just seeing the crowd grow. And then hearing from the president directly, like, what was attracted to them. And that was kind of surprising to me and very encouraging, because it wasn't the number go up. It wasn't like, hey, we're going to put our bank reserves in this so it goes up over time. Not that I'm against that at all, but it was their real kind of focus on the transactional side of it and seeing like, hey, this really benefits the lives of the people who are unbanked. This portion of the society that we're always trying to figure out how can we help, how can we bring them in, and nothing ever seems to work. There's this little project with very little funding and, run by people who really don't know what they're doing, some middle-aged white guy and a team of most of them haven't, most of them haven't gone to university, and some of them only, sixth grade educations, but they're out there making it happen. And so I think that's what was encouraging, was seeing that was their focus and that was what they wanted to replicate.
Well, really, potentially that whole idea of how much schooling you have determining what you can do. That's a really good picture to paint that. Hey, you can do a lot of really impactful things um, if it's going to help change your life, you know, and that's a really fascinating outcome of this from my perspective.
I think people significantly underestimate how resourceful people are and how much they will figure out if there's something that's going to benefit their life. They'll figure out how to use it. It's not going to be too complicated for them. Um, and people always think that, oh, well, they're never going to be able to use that. Well, they'll probably be able to use it better than you because they have more incentive. You have all these other things that are easier that they don't have access to. And so they'll put the work into making it happen.
Yeah, yeah. I was in a another Twitter space with someone at Lightning, and it was specifically around West African developers on Lightning. And it's really interesting to think that the network could really grow in these places that have been locked out of, uh, let's just call it financial inclusion. Uh, and that network effect may grow and grow and grow to the point that uh, there's just this massive wave coming at the traditional centers of power to the point where if they haven't made moves at that point, it could be really interesting to see how that all plays out.
No, definitely. I mean, I think there's lots of people now who are running to catch up who really would prefer for Bitcoin just to go away, but they realize that it's not going to, and so and it's going to basically upend their business model, and so they realize they can't fight it, and they need to figure out how they can't stop the wave, so they need to figure out how to ride the wave, and so which is good, it's smart, and I understand. Of course, nobody wants to embrace something that's going to negatively impact their business model, but it's coming. So it's either you're part of it or you're gonna just be relegated to the dustbin of history. So
Tsunamis come really quick. You can't see them till they're really close to shore.
exactly, if you wait till you see them, it's too late.
Yeah. Well, you've had this really cool vantage point in the community there in El Zante of a whole lot of open source initiatives and companies that are building on Lightning's open source protocol. What would you say about the community, and what has been maybe one of the most fun things, or a couple of the most fun things you've seen as this huge amount of developers and people just wanting to learn are converging in this community?
I think it's fun because it's so new and so it's kind of accessible to everybody because even the experts are only like a few years ahead. It's not like, they have decades of experience. And so people coming into the space feel like, okay, it's still a good time to get in. I'm still going to be, on the vanguard of this because it's going to continue to grow and there's going to be lots of people coming behind me. And so I think there's a sense of excitement within the community. There's also a sense that they really are just about Bitcoin. Like, that's what motivates them. They're not financially driven. Of course, everybody's got bills to pay and everybody needs to make money to support their lives, but that's not the driving thing behind what they're trying to do. They really believe that Bitcoin can make the world better, that it can help those that are the poorest right now, and they want to be a part of it. And there tends to be just this kind of mentality that it doesn't matter if it's good for them or not. If it's good for Bitcoin, they push forward with it.
That's really cool. I'm gonna have to. It's my wife and wife's and my 10-year anniversary this year, and so maybe in December, which I believe is pretty close. Is it summer down there at that point?
Yeah. Summer's basically like November through March is kind of the summer season. So
Okay.
December's a beautiful time to be here.
Well, maybe she has her heart set on Hawaii, but maybe we can go to a different surf spot.
I'll send you some links for some beautiful places here, and you just don't tell her where it is. Just say, hey, what do you think if we rent this place? And she'll say yes. And you're like, I didn't tell you it was in El Salvador.
That could be fun. That could be fun.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think honestly, I haven't met a single person who came down here and wasn't like blown away. And it's always way better than people think. And it's not scary. And they didn't feel unsafe. And all the things that, go through people's minds when they hear us El Salvador. They leave with a very different vision of El Salvador.
It just seems like an awesome community in general of people, and then you add the beautiful coastal element to it, and what a cool place.
No, it definitely is. I feel very fortunate to live here.
What are, kind of maybe to land the plane, Mike, what are you most excited about, let's say, over the next 6 to 12 months there in El Salvador, specifically on Bitcoin Beach, but the country as well?
I'm excited and a little concerned for September 7th. I'm excited kind of longer term. I think El Salvador has the opportunity to really lead the world forward. I really hope that people are not going to evaluate the success of this based on the first few months, because I think any project like this is always extremely rocky being launched, and this one is extremely ambitious. And so I think as long as we kind of keep that in perspective and realize that this is going to be a couple year kind of transformative time. But there's people that are against this project for political reasons. There's people against this project for economic reasons, and so they're going to come out on the news and they're going to point to certain things and they're going to call it a failure and they're going to say I told you so and all those things. And so just like we've seen with Bitcoin so many times that people have called its demise, and this is the last straw, and Bitcoin is dead, and we know that they're going to be wrong. And so I think it's going to be the same thing with this. You'll see people saying, it was a failure. Maybe a year from now, there'll be people saying that, but 10 years from now, they'll be looking back at a transformative time in the world.
Yeah, I think it'll be very fascinating, because at the same time that El Salvador is declaring Bitcoin legal tender, you have this infrastructure bill in the United States, and you straddle both of these countries, right? And they're just that cryptocurrency provision was just such an interesting little addition in there. But it's going to come up against, okay, but this country declares it legal tender, but then the crazy thing about Bitcoin is it doesn't really fit in the what the United States kind of uses across all the states as the definition of money, because it's like, I think that definition in the wording is something like coin and paper, of which Bitcoin is neither. So any thoughts that you've had on that, or have you just been too busy to even think about that?
I mean, no, I have given that quite a bit of thought, and how they will handle that in the short term. I think in the long term, they're going to have to give in to the inevitability of it and realize that, countries are going to do one of two things. They're either basically going to cut themselves off from the system that the rest of the world's using and become the next North Korea or Cuba, or country that kind of is held back, or they're going to embrace this like they have the internet, even though it disrupted things and caused challenges and brought some bad things with it, but realize that, hey, we can't stop this, and we definitely don't want to be behind. We want to be leading the way. And so I think it's kind of inevitable, but I never underestimate the ability of politicians to screw things up. And so, who knows? That could be the thing that cements America's decline to being an economic has-been. I hope not, but it's always a possibility.
Well, I will keep earning and winning and buying Bitcoin as much as I can, and just in case of just that instance.
That's the smart thing to do, for sure.
Yeah. Well, Mike, how can people find you? You already have quite the wide connection, but for those who maybe have never heard of you or know how to follow you, how can they do that?
The best way is just on Twitter, at Bitcoin Beach. And we also have a website, www.bitcoinbeach.com. I'm we're better about updating Twitter than we are the website, but the website has all the basic information. And I would say just come down to El Salvador and experience it.
Awesome. Well, hey, if you send me those, those nice spots, maybe I'll put them in the show notes, and others can benefit too.
Perfect.
Well, thanks again, Mike, and for those who are listening, thanks for joining us. Hope to see you next time.